Across the African continent, outdated infrastructure has consistently blocked nations from reaching their full economic potential. Despite living in an era defined by technological advancement and global connectivity, only a single African nation can claim to operate a modern high-speed railway network. That distinction belongs to Morocco, which inaugurated its rapid transit system in 2018 with substantial backing from France, becoming a continental pioneer in modern rail transportation. But Africa's railway landscape is about to shift dramatically. Nigeria, the continent's most populous nation and largest economy, is preparing to join this exclusive club. Recent developments have breathed new life into a railway initiative that has been in planning stages for more than 10 years. The scope of this undertaking is breathtaking. A proposed investment of $60 billion aimed at constructing a 4,000-kilometer railway network designed to connect Nigeria's most vital commercial centers and transportation nodes. The questions surrounding this mega project are as significant as its price tag. Where exactly will Nigeria source such enormous capital? Perhaps more crucially, what transformation could a railway system of this magnitude bring to a nation of over 200 million people? And why has this particular infrastructure project attracted international attention and, in some quarters, controversy? Today, we're diving deep into Nigeria's railway ambitions, the international partnerships making it possible, and what this means for Africa's economic future. To understand Nigeria's current railway push, we need to step back and examine the broader context of infrastructure development across Africa over the past decade. The year 2013 marked a turning point when China unveiled its Belt and Road Initiative, an ambitious global infrastructure program that would dramatically reshape economic cooperation between China and developing nations worldwide. In the 12 years since that announcement, the relationship between Chinese investors and African nations has evolved into something far more comprehensive than anyone initially predicted. Today, more than 40 African countries maintain active partnerships with China spanning multiple sectors. Media, panoramic shots of African ports, African power plants, modern African classrooms, with diverse students' transportation networks, power generation, commercial trade, foreign investment, technological transfer, and educational exchange programs. The results of these partnerships are visible across the continent. In Kenya, Chinese contractors delivered the Mombasa-Nairobi Standard Gauge Railway, fundamentally changing how goods and people move between Kenya's primary seaport and its capital city. The efficiency gains have been substantial, cutting travel time dramatically while increasing freight capacity. Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, became home to East Africa's first modern light rail transit system, constructed with Chinese technical assistance and financing. This urban railway didn't just improve commuter transportation, it revitalized the city's evening economy by making it safer and easier for residents to move around after dark. Further south, Tanzania benefited from Chinese investment in expanding the port of Dar es Salaam, significantly enhancing the region's capacity to handle international trade. These infrastructure upgrades have created tangible improvements in daily life and economic activity. Now, Nigeria represents the most ambitious chapter yet in this infrastructure story. The $60 billion commitment to build 4,000 kilometers of high-speed railway across Nigeria isn't just another construction project. It's a statement about Africa's infrastructure future and the changing dynamics of global economic influence. Nigeria occupies a special place in Africa's economic hierarchy. With approximately 220 million residents, it stands as the continent's most populous nation. Its economy consistently ranks as Africa's largest, and in recent years, its growth rate has outpaced every other African country. The foundation of Nigeria's economic strength was laid decades ago. During the 1970s, Nigeria emerged as Africa's leading oil producer, a position it has maintained for half a century. Today, it remains the continent's top petroleum exporter, and these abundant hydrocarbon resources have fueled rapid economic expansion. However, Nigeria's remarkable population growth and economic development have created infrastructure demands that the existing systems simply cannot meet. Anyone who has traveled through Nigeria can attest to the stark gap between the country's economic ambitions and its physical infrastructure reality. Consider Nigeria's railway system. Much of what exists today consists of narrow-gauge tracks installed during British colonial rule, decades before Nigeria gained independence. These antiquated lines have suffered from chronic underinvestment and neglect. Current estimates suggest that approximately 70% of the nation's railway locomotives require urgent repair or complete replacement. Train operations remain painfully slow and unreliable, making rail transport largely impractical for modern commerce. Air travel exists as an alternative, but cost creates an insurmountable barrier for most Nigerians. Flight ticket prices place air transportation completely out of reach for the average citizen, making it a luxury reserved for the wealthy or for urgent business travel. This leaves road transportation as the primary option for the vast majority of Nigerians. Yet here too, the infrastructure tells a troubling story. Nigeria maintains nearly 200,000 kilometers of roadways, but more than 60% of this network lacks proper paving. The southeastern and northwestern regions face particularly severe challenges, where seasonal rains combined with insufficient maintenance funding have left road surfaces badly deteriorated. Roughly 40% of Nigeria's road network exists in a state of chronic disrepair, creating dangerous conditions and slowing economic activity. These infrastructure deficits don't just inconvenience travelers. They represent a fundamental brake on Nigeria's economic potential, limiting trade efficiency, raising transportation costs, and preventing the country from fully capitalizing on its demographic and resource advantages. Recognizing these limitations, Nigerian leadership has committed to a transformative solution. Just weeks ago, the Nigerian government formally unveiled plans for an infrastructure package that has captured international attention. The $60 billion commitment encompasses not only high-speed railway construction, but also development of the country's natural gas resources, creating an integrated approach to energy and transportation. The proposed railway network spans 4,000 kilometers, positioning this initiative among the most significant infrastructure undertakings in African history. But what many observers don't realize is how long this vision has been in development. The story actually begins in 2010, when Nigerian officials signed a preliminary cooperation agreement with Chinese counterparts to construct a high-speed rail corridor linking the capital city of Abuja with Lagos, Nigeria's commercial heart and primary port. The proposed line would stretch approximately 1,200 kilometers, representing a quantum leap forward in Nigerian transportation capability. However, timing proved problematic. As Africa's largest oil exporter, Nigeria's government revenues depended heavily on global petroleum prices. During the early 2010s, dramatic fluctuations in oil markets created fiscal uncertainty. Chinese development banks did approve loan facilities to support the project, but Nigeria struggled to secure its portion of the necessary funding on the anticipated timeline. The combination of revenue uncertainty and broader global economic instability ultimately forced Nigerian authorities to suspend the project in 2014. Financial challenges weren't the only obstacle. Nigeria's political landscape created additional complications. Frequent government transitions and bureaucratic inefficiency made it difficult to maintain policy continuity or keep the railway project as a consistent priority across different administrations. Each new government brought different perspectives on infrastructure spending and development strategy. Security concerns also loomed large. The presence of insurgent groups in certain regions and ongoing local conflicts raised legitimate questions about construction site safety and whether work could proceed without constant disruption. In retrospect, pausing the project during that unstable period may have been the prudent choice. But a decade makes a difference. By 2025, many of the conditions that forced the initial suspension have improved or evolved. Security situations in key regions have stabilized. Government commitment to infrastructure development has strengthened. And crucially, financing mechanisms have become more sophisticated and reliable. Nigerian authorities have remained steadfast in their determination to realize the high-speed rail vision. They view this infrastructure as essential not just for transportation efficiency, but as a catalyst for broader economic transformation. By August 2025, concrete progress became visible. Reports emerged that Nigeria's $60 billion high-speed rail initiative had completed approximately 90% of the preliminary approval processes necessary to move forward. This suggests that actual construction could commence in the near future, potentially within months rather than years. If completed as envisioned, Nigeria will officially become only the second African nation to operate a true high-speed rail network. This distinction carries symbolic weight beyond mere prestige. It signals Nigeria's transition into a more advanced phase of economic development. But monumental infrastructure projects require two essential elements: capital and technical expertise. The question of who will finance and construct Nigeria's railway network leads us to examine some fascinating developments in international development finance. The initial phase of Nigeria's high-speed rail project will receive funding through the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, commonly known as the AIIB. This multilateral development bank was established in 2016 under Chinese leadership, with a specific mandate to finance major infrastructure projects throughout developing regions. In recent years, the AIIB has allocated significant resources to African initiatives, and the number of African member countries has grown to 16 nations. With financing arrangements secured, attention turns to implementation. Who possesses the technical capability, industrial capacity, and project management experience to deliver a 4,000-kilometer railway network in a challenging environment? The answer, perhaps unsurprisingly, points to China. Some observers, particularly those who encounter sensationalized reporting or politically motivated criticism online, may question China's credentials in high-speed rail development. The reality contradicts these skeptical narratives quite dramatically. Chinese high-speed rail technology has been exported to more than 40 countries and territories across Asia, Europe, Africa, and Latin America. Within China itself, the operational high-speed rail network has surpassed 48,000 kilometers, making it by far the world's most extensive system. To put this in perspective, China operates more high-speed rail than the rest of the world combined. When international tenders for major rail projects are announced, Chinese companies bring several competitive advantages. Construction timelines are typically faster than those proposed by European or Japanese competitors. Overall project costs generally come in substantially lower while maintaining quality standards. These factors make Chinese bids highly attractive to developing nations with limited budgets and urgent infrastructure needs. But the Chinese approach to railway export goes far beyond simply selling rolling stock or providing engineering blueprints. Chinese contractors offer comprehensive solutions that cover the entire project lifecycle. This includes initial surveying and route design, financing arrangements, actual construction and engineering, equipment manufacturing and supply, personnel training programs, and long-term operational support and maintenance. This turnkey approach proves particularly valuable for countries like Nigeria that may lack deep institutional experience in modern railway operations. Rather than coordinating multiple international contractors and vendors, Nigerian authorities can work with an integrated team that takes responsibility for delivering a functioning system. Given these factors, Nigeria's decision to partner with Chinese companies for this mega-project represents not just a logical choice, but arguably the most practical path forward. This isn't Nigeria's first experience with Chinese railway construction. The partnership between the two nations in this sector actually dates back to 2014, providing valuable experience and relationship building that now supports the much larger high-speed rail initiative. The inaugural project connected Abuja to Kaduna, spanning approximately 186 kilometers with trains designed to operate at speeds up to 150 kilometers per hour. This line entered commercial service in July 2016, marking Nigeria's first step into modern rail transportation. The impact was immediate and dramatic. Travelers who previously faced long, dangerous road journeys could now move between these cities in a fraction of the time, with dramatically improved safety and comfort. The railway began operating at capacity almost immediately, demonstrating the enormous pent-up demand for reliable transportation alternatives. Following this success, Chinese contractors delivered the Lagos-Ibadan Railway, which commenced operations in June 2021. This southern corridor complemented the northern Abuja-Kaduna line, creating a pattern of improved connectivity between Nigeria's major population and economic centers. The transformation in these corridors has been remarkable. Business travel has become more predictable and efficient. Freight transport costs have declined. The railways have even influenced real estate development patterns, with property values increasing near station locations as people seek convenient access to this modern infrastructure. Beyond these completed projects, Nigeria and China have signed agreements for 2 additional railway lines, the Kaduna-Kano corridor and the Ibadan-Kaduna connection. Both projects are progressing through planning and design phases, with construction expected to begin in the coming years. Collectively, these 4 railway projects represent a combined investment exceeding $8.3 billion. The substantial majority of this capital has been provided by China through development loans to the Nigerian government, demonstrating a level of financial commitment that extends far beyond typical commercial relationships. This naturally raises a critical question. Why would China commit such enormous financial resources to building railways in Nigeria? What strategic calculations drive these massive infrastructure investments across Africa? The answer involves both immediate economic interests and longer-term strategic positioning. Let's examine the economic rationale first. Nigeria possesses extraordinary natural resource wealth. Current estimates place proven oil reserves at approximately 37 billion barrels, ranking second in Africa and 11th globally. As mentioned earlier, Nigeria maintains its position as Africa's largest oil producer and petroleum exporter. Meanwhile, China's massive industrial economy requires enormous energy imports to sustain production and economic growth. Chinese manufacturers and power generators consume vast quantities of oil, natural gas, and other energy products annually. Securing reliable, long-term access to these resources represents a strategic priority for Chinese economic planners. The infrastructure for resources model provides an elegant solution. Rather than simply purchasing oil on international spot markets, Chinese state-owned enterprises invest in transportation infrastructure that African nations desperately need. In exchange, China secures preferential access to resource development opportunities and long-term supply agreements for petroleum products. This arrangement creates tangible benefits for both parties. Nigeria receives world-class infrastructure that its government budget alone could not finance, while China locks in stable energy supplies at predictable costs. The railways themselves generate economic activity, employment, and technological transfer that can catalyze broader development. But there's another dimension to China's African infrastructure strategy that goes beyond immediate resource extraction. By investing heavily in transportation networks across Africa, Chinese companies are establishing commercial relationships and market presence that will pay dividends for decades. Nigeria's population of over 200 million people represents an enormous consumer market. As Nigerian incomes rise and the economy develops, demand for consumer goods, industrial equipment, and services will expand dramatically. Chinese companies that have built relationships and established operations in Nigeria will be well positioned to capture significant market share in this growth. Furthermore, improved infrastructure doesn't just benefit bilateral China-Nigeria trade. As railway networks expand and connect across West Africa, they facilitate regional trade integration. Chinese goods can move more efficiently throughout the region, and Chinese logistics companies can provide services across multiple markets. Given these mutual benefits, one might expect international observers to welcome Chinese infrastructure investment in Africa as a positive development. Yet the response from Western governments and media has often been sharply critical. The most frequently deployed criticism accuses China of creating debt traps in Africa, suggesting that infrastructure loans are designed to become unpayable, eventually forcing African nations to surrender strategic assets or political autonomy to Chinese creditors. This narrative has been promoted by Western politicians, think tanks, and media outlets with remarkable consistency. But why does this criticism emerge with such intensity? Understanding this requires examining the historical context of Western involvement in Africa and the economic interests at stake. For several centuries, European colonial powers extracted immense wealth from Africa while providing minimal investment in local development. The colonial economic model was explicitly extractive. Resources flowed to Europe while African populations saw little benefit from the wealth beneath their feet. This exploitation left behind political instability, artificial borders that ignored ethnic and cultural realities, and environmental degradation that persists today. Although formal colonialism ended decades ago, Western economic interests in Africa remained substantial. European and American companies continued to dominate resource extraction, infrastructure contracts, and financial services across the continent. China's Belt and Road Initiative has disrupted these long-established patterns. Through infrastructure investments, Chinese companies have expanded their presence and influence throughout Africa at a remarkable pace. In the railway sector alone, Chinese contractors have built or upgraded more than 10,000 kilometers of track across the continent, along with nearly 100,000 kilometers of highways. These projects have genuinely transformed transportation in many regions, generating economic activity and development opportunities. But they have also significantly expanded Chinese commercial and diplomatic influence, while Western presence has relatively declined. For Western companies, this shift creates direct competitive pressure. Many Chinese firms working on African infrastructure projects bring complete supply chains with them, sourcing steel, rolling stock, and construction materials from Chinese manufacturers. This approach directly displaces market share that previously belonged to European suppliers and contractors. Additionally, as China invests in infrastructure, Chinese state-owned enterprises simultaneously negotiate long-term access agreements for oil, natural gas, and mineral resources. This challenges Western companies' historical dominance over African resource sectors. Nigeria provides a clear example. The country's major oil fields have been primarily developed and operated by Western petroleum companies for decades. If Chinese investment increases substantially, those resource revenues will need to be redistributed among more participants, potentially reducing Western companies' share. But this entire debate often overlooks a crucial factor: African agency. The countries receiving Chinese investment are not passive actors unable to evaluate their own interests. African governments and populations can clearly assess which partnerships deliver tangible benefits and which partners treat them with genuine respect. The narrative that China is somehow tricking African nations into disadvantageous agreements relies on a patronizing assumption that African leaders cannot negotiate effectively on behalf of their countries. This assumption doesn't withstand scrutiny. African governments engage with multiple potential partners, Chinese, European, American, Middle Eastern, and make calculated decisions about which relationships serve their development priorities. They understand the terms of loan agreements, the expected returns on infrastructure investments, and the strategic implications of resource access arrangements. When African nations consistently choose to partner with China on infrastructure projects, this reflects their assessment that Chinese terms are more favorable than alternatives. Chinese development loans typically carry lower interest rates than commercial Western financing, Chinese contractors deliver projects faster and at lower cost than Western competitors. And crucially, Chinese partnerships generally come with fewer political conditions than Western aid programs, which often require recipients to adopt specific governance reforms or policy changes. This isn't to suggest Chinese infrastructure investment is entirely altruistic or without self-interest. Every major international economic relationship involves negotiation over terms that balance the interests of all parties. But the evidence suggests that African nations view Chinese infrastructure partnerships as beneficial overall, which is why they continue to pursue them, despite Western criticism. Nigeria's decision to move forward with the $60 billion railway project, with substantial Chinese involvement, reflects this calculation.